All right, everybody, let's kick this off. Happy Tuesday. Can't believe it's August. I don't know where these months are going, but here we are. We are working right now to update our docs build, which will have the agenda for today's town hall. So we'll get you a link down in general once those refresh. But I can start working through some of the basics, and then I'll talk about the agenda, even if you don't have the link. We have a ton of really cool stuff to share again. It feels like it's been 3 months since we updated you, so it's pretty surprising how short it's been. But I like to start these with a quick kind of intro to what this project is all about for those of you that are brand new, and just give you some kind of context for what Tableland is, what the Rigs NFT is, how we work, some lingo you'll see in the agenda. So first and foremost, Tableland is a project to build a brand new protocol for Web3. We're building a database. We came up with a pretty nice new tagline the other day. We're building the read-write-own database, meaning that people can create tables of data, rows and columns, that are stored on a decentralized permissionless network of validators, and can control and own how the data is written into those tables with smart contracts and on-chain permissions. We're connected to other L1s and L2s. Currently, we're running on 3 testnets, Ethereum, Polygon, and Optimism testnets. And we actually, in today's chat, will talk about a rollout of the Tableland testnet to some main nets, which is a really great milestone for the protocol. Just a couple weeks ago, we launched the Tableland NFT called Rigs. Rigs are first and foremost an experiment in what can be built with the Tableland protocol. So the Tableland protocol allows people to store data that has mutability baked into it. So we like to say mutable data with immutable rules. The data is mutable, but the rules can be baked into your smart contracts and into these other chains where we run. And that gives a lot of really brand new and powerful ways that you can craft NFTs. So the Rigs NFT was at first really an experiment to see how far we could take that. And we really actually think it can become a core piece of the whole development of the protocol and even the operation of the network. So we're excited to take it there. And we shared some small sneaks into that. And we'll have a little bit more today about early roadmap and where that project is going. And I think there's a lot of rig owners on the call today that will be interested to hear that. I thought it'd be just nice to spend 1 minute talking about the way we work. We work just like if any of you have interacted in any DAOs, we work on in a cadence called seasons. So seasons for us are roughly 4 months long. And we then break that season up into various what we call checkpoints and milestones along the way. If any of you are software developers, you'll be familiar with semantic versioning, but we version the whole organization based on those checkpoints, milestones, and seasons. So today is the town hall for season 4, milestone 1, checkpoint 2. And that's this 2-week period that we're operating in right now. And so we're going to update you on a lot of things that were finished in the last 2-week checkpoint period. We're going to update you on a bunch of things that are coming over the next 1 or 2 checkpoint periods. And we're going to update you on just some new information and events that are coming. Let me just check really quickly if we've got a link to share on the agenda. If not, I can just share it out to you. Okay, looks like we don't have the docs build going yet. So, all right, so a quick overview of what we're going to do today. I'm going to kick it off. Every town hall, we kind of break this up, and I just hand off the mic to different people on my team to talk about, things that they've been pushing out, developments that they've been working on, and things that are coming. So we're going to talk about a bunch of protocol updates first. Then we're going to jump into some discussions about the network validator. This is a really important piece to Tableland. Currently, Tableland, we as an org run a single validator that is securing the data that's coming into testnet. We are about to invite the first external validators to help us build out that network, which is another big milestone for us. So we'll talk about that for a moment. Then we will jump into ecosystem things. So we've had a lot of pretty awesome events and teams building on Tableland in the ecosystem. So we want to kind of focus on that for a moment and talk about what we've seen, and also some new pieces that are coming, new events that we're throwing, new events that we're taking part in. And then finally, we'll jump into Tableland rigs. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about two things. One, I thought it'd be fun to just have a discussion about the way the NFT drop went, because we've mentioned a few places, some things that we did differently there, some road bumps that we hit along the way. And so I thought we'd just kind of like relive that weekend and leave some kind of learnings from us to future projects that launch NFTs. And then we'll jump into the public roadmap. So putting some timeline on some of the features that we've communicated, and after the town hall, we'll drop that roadmap in our public docs, so you can always return to it. All right, there's a lot of information. Hopefully we'll get you a link to follow along here shortly. So like I said, let's jump into, one last note. We always have a Q&A at the end. And so if you have questions along the way, there's kind of two options. I think the best one is just drop your questions into general. Just go ahead and chat them. I think, I can't recall if the permissions for requesting to speak on the Mesa are set up. So if those are, feel free to raise your hand too, and we'll pull you up on stage during the Q&A session to talk to us then. But just throughout the whole town hall, just drop your questions in general if you prefer, and we can address those. Okay, cool. So let's kick this off with some updates about the protocol. There's a really cool pending release that is coming up that I'm going to invite Bruno up here to just talk about what it is and why it's interesting. So let me...
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Hey, everyone. This is just a quick notice on something we're working on. We're about to release 2 additional HTTP endpoints to help developers build on top of existing tables, which is something that we're very excited to see happening more. The first endpoint is, it helps with schema discovery. That is, giving a table, what is the schema of the table? And the second one helps with the inverse problem, which is giving the schema, what are all the tables that share that same schema? And we hope with those 2 endpoints, we see more projects built on top of tables that already exist in Tableland. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have. Yeah, stay tuned. I think
Cool.
Carson is next.
Yeah, thanks, Bruno. I think also there's some pretty neat implications for that schema that I think Carson's going to talk about. So let's... Oh, Carson, you're up here. Good. All you.
Yeah, cool. Everybody can hear me, it looks like, yeah. So thanks, Bruno. That's awesome. I think, Bruno mentioned we're excited to see what people do. And I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the kind of wild things you can start to imagine with those new endpoints. In particular, you can do things like, I have a game with a schema for my table, and other games can now search based on that schema for other tables that support that schema, and potentially leverage like standardized schemas across different experiences. So you can imagine some pretty cool stuff where, totally separate developers working on totally separate projects can effectively collaborate over the use of schemas over tables, and so you can build up these like potentially world building experiences where we've got these like different worlds interacting based on a common schema. And that's like really a new API that just like fully leverages the power of relational table models and things like that. So I think we're going to see a lot of pretty cool stuff happening with those schemas, and just having the like back and forth is pretty cool as well. I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if like you see in dev chat people sharing their schemas and saying, hey, let's collaborate and things like that. So more to come there. So we do have a bunch of other stuff coming up in terms of protocol dispatches. So Bruno, who just was talking, he also did a bunch of work, him and Ignacio, on developing a custom SQL parser. So some of you may recall we released our SQL spec a couple town halls ago. And as part of that work, our engineering team developed a custom parser for the SQL spec so that it's fully spec compliant. And there's a bunch of really cool things that come out of having your own spec. Like we can start to do some like more creative new SQL things, and we can support things like we already do Ethereum addresses as a like primitive within our SQL spec. So we've got this custom parser, and we're about to in the next couple weeks do a big release around that, and actually release some open source libraries so that developers building on Tableland can actually leverage the parser through Wasm, and they can do things like actually parse and validate their queries before sending them to Tableland to cut down on potentially, mistakes. You can catch mistakes and things like that while you're developing. So there'll be a bunch of really nice outputs from that I think users will find pretty useful. And that stuff will find its way into our SDK and into our command line tools and all that stuff. So developers will have one more tool in their toolbox for optimizing their SQL queries. So I think that'll be pretty cool. Another really big one is, and I might actually tag Ignacio to talk about this if he wants, but we're about to push out support for multi-transactions with. Sorry, I'm gonna use some special language here. So when we're talking about SQL transactions, we're talking about statements, say SQL statements, and then when we're talking about Ethereum or EVM things, we're talking about transactions. And so you can make transactions or smart contract calls in order to interact with the Tableland registry and smart contract. And I'm actually going to talk about this a little bit more in a second. But now we also support having multiple transactions within a given EVM transaction. So that means you can do things like create a table and mutate that table and revoke or grant access to that table all within a single smart contract method call, so that you can do a lot more nuanced interactions with smart contracts via smart contracts with Tableland protocol. And Ignacio, if you're around and you want to give some nuance to that update, please do. Otherwise, just remain silent. Cricket. Okay, cool. Oh, there he is.
Hey, yeah, I think that's a really good summary. Maybe I can dive deeper into maybe in the next town hall on how it works and some other indirect changes that we will do in the validator in the same feature implementation. So, but I think that was a fair summary.
Cool, great. So yes, if anyone's interested in learning more about that, then let's hit up Ignacio for the next town hall, or you can just ask questions in our dev chat channels and things like that. Okay, so the other update that's coming, that's going to be a protocol native change, is it revolves around our table NFTs. So hopefully everybody is aware, but just in case you're not, every table on Tableland, which many people, including us for rigs, use to represent NFT metadata, those tables themselves are also NFTs. They're NFTs with, all of the traits and properties that you might expect an NFT to have, and we're adding new traits as we kind of come up with new and interesting ways that you want to think about a table, like how many rows, how many columns, what's its schema, blah, blah, blah. Right now, there's a very basic image behind the Tableland tables if you were to say look at the tables that you own on OpenSea. OpenSea has some links that you can look at NFTs on testnets and things like that. So if you were to look at your collection of tables on OpenSea, and once we get the link up for Town Hall, there is an example of this. They're kind of boring, right? They're just the logo, the Tableland logo, which, don't get me wrong, it's a great logo, very powerful, but it's not the most exciting thing. So coming up soon, we're actually going to have tables be interesting visual assets as well as useful utility assets, i.e. tables. So we'll have a visual representation of what the structure of the table looks like, and we'll even have some additional tools to allow you to interact with the table in an interactive, real way, very much like a spreadsheet or something like that. So that's coming up soon, and we're actually scoping basically how far we're going to take those interactive elements. So if you have opinions about what you'd like a table NFT to do, look like, or behave like, please do hit up our team on Discord. Lastly, we are going to be pushing Tableland to some mainnets coming up very soon in the next couple of weeks, if I'm not mistaken. So now there's a bit of a nuance here, and I want to make sure it's pretty clear as we're recording this so everybody will know. So right now, Tableland is in testnet phase. Okay, so the Tableland testnet is a testnet like any other. And we have deployed our registry contract, the thing that you interact with on chain, to various testnets, including Ethereum Goerli, Polygon Mumbai, Optimism Kovan, and et cetera, et cetera. Very soon, we will be deploying the registry contract, the thing that you interact with on chain, to some mainnets, including Ethereum mainnet, Optimism, and Polygon, and potentially others. This means that you can do access control and interesting things on chain on those mainnets, but you're still storing data on the Tableland testnet. And Tableland mainnet will be coming in the future, but for now, we've got basically testnets, the Tableland testnets on mainnets. I think it's going to open up some opportunities for people who are interacting with like existing dApps and tooling that is already on the mainnets. But for people who are still exploring or just testing out MVPs, we obviously recommend that you use fake internet money instead of real internet money. So something to keep in mind, something to look forward to, and we'll make a big announcement around this when that happens. Okay, so I think that's pretty good for protocol dispatches, Andrew. It looks like I'm next up in the queue on our updates. Do we have the town hall notes public yet?
Yeah, we did. We found an issue on the docs that's still getting fixed, but we shared a link to some stand-in notes.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I'll just continue. You guys can keep listening to me.
Yeah. Move on. Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So next up in the schedule here for updates is our network validator. So a bunch of people have been asking about this. I'm going to be talking to a few groups kind of like separately about some plans here in the near future. But I did want to give just kind of an overview of what we're talking about when we're talking about a validator. So what are they? Why are they important? A little bit about our testnet validator rollout plan. So again, I mentioned we're in testnet phase. Right now, Tableland runs the only validator. And so we're going to start onboarding new teams to have a whole network of validators to get a more decentralized network going. So I want to talk a little bit about that, the rollout that we're doing there, and then what's coming up next. So let's start with what is a validator? What are we talking about when we're talking about a validator? So validators are the nodes on the network that actually execute the Tableland protocol. They are the nodes that are materializing the table. So when you mint a table and you insert, data into that table, say it's NFT metadata or say it's in-game state or whatever, when you're sending those calls to the smart contract, there are a bunch of validators there will be a bunch of validators sitting there listening to those events and materializing that data. That's what their job is. And so they have basically kind of three core responsibilities. Validators are there to listen to on-chain events, and I'll talk about what I mean by on-chain events in a second, to materialize the Tableland compliant SQL queries into their local database engine, which is SQLite right now. Okay. Then their other job is to serve read queries. So, if you're going to put data in a database, you want some way to get the data out of the database. We've got to have the validators for that. And then they also relay write queries from our registry smart contract on behalf of users. So, you might be a developer who's building an app or a dApp, and you want to be able to relay transactions through the smart contract via validators. Now, this is what validators are doing right now. And the responsibilities of these are going to change over time as the sort of protocol evolves. They'll do sort of more and less things, but that's the sort of state of things right now. And longer term, the validators are going to have sort of increasing responsibility on the state of the network as they work to secure the network and ensure redundancy and ensure payments and all that good stuff. And so we'll be releasing some more information about what validators look like in terms of their position in the network and how they interact with smart contracts and things like that. But I just wanted to give you a really quick kind of overview of how Tableland works, right? So, and that just gives you an idea of a better understanding of how the whole thing works. So Tableland is a bunch of components, including an on-chain component. And we call this the registry smart contract. And basically, this is an NFT registry of all of the tables. And each target chain has one of these registries on it, right? So if you've got a bunch of tables on Goerli or a bunch of tables on Polygon or wherever, there's a registry on each of those. And users mint tables via this registry, just like you mint an NFT. The registry contract itself has basically a method called create table, and that's where you're minting the tables. And what that also does is the validators are sitting there listening for those create table events, and when they see one, they create the table locally in their database. So now suddenly you've hit a decentralized chain, maybe it's Polygon or whatever, and we've got a decentralized network of validators that are watching for events and materializing them. Then they've all got the tables locally. Validators then detect any new events like a create table or a run SQL for like if you're inserting data or updating data. They're sitting there watching that and materializing all of those changes locally on the tables. So you can do run SQL, blah, blah, blah. The validators detect all of these events and execute the mutating queries locally on their own thing, and we get this sort of consensus of state across all the different validators. And I'm simplifying a lot of the details, but this gives you a good idea of what's going on. Then all those validators are running an RPC endpoint. Basically, you can query them using HTTP and run read queries, so select stuff from them. Right, so we've got this whole flow of there's an on-chain component, there's an off-chain component, and the off-chain validators are all materializing the data that they see on-chain. And that's, writ large how it works. So that's why we need validators, because they're the ones who are running the whole network. Okay, how are we going to get more validators? Well, we're starting with a limited set of sort of very targeted partners for the first 2 to 3 months, and we're starting that now. We're going to go through a phase of very rapid testing and optimization to make sure that running a validator is an easy and fun thing to do for the validators and that they can easily upgrade and update as the protocol evolves. We are finalizing the first set of validator partners that we're going to be reaching out to sort of this week and next. And then we're actually starting outreach and onboarding kind of now through August. We're going to be targeting mostly teams with existing experience running Web3 infrastructure. So we're targeting teams that have done this before so that they kind of already have opinions about what a good validator setup looks like. They're going to have the infrastructure. They're going to have public IP addresses that they can leverage. They're going to have all of those things. So those are the teams that we're targeting at first. If you are one of those teams or you're part of one of those teams and you want to get involved, please do DM or hit me up on our Discord or use our form to sign up for that. And I've already talked to some teams about this as well. And then once we get into later in the season, so like in the fall, after we've gone through some of these preliminary, very targeted, limited set partners, then we will start opening it up to the broader ecosystem for people to start participating. It'll still be sort of smaller incentivized groups of validators running that. It will still be a very high touch experience, but we'll slowly be rolling that out as we move. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of what's going on. I don't want to take up any more of our time, so I will step back and just hit me up on Discord if you've got any more questions about any of that validator stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Carson. Super thorough overview of the validators. I didn't expect that, but hopefully that was really useful for folks. If folks can't tell, Carson has been a university professor for a long time. So a little bit of that came out there, helping to bootstrap everybody's knowledge about what the validators are and why they're important. So yeah, thanks, Carson. So for the next part, I mean, the ecosystem work has been just on rapid fire for the last few weeks or months even. So I think there's mostly, this is mostly going to be from Dan and Brian, kind of updating things that have happened and what's still to come.
Dan, do you want to take it to start? Maybe HackFS, and then we can move into pilot program stuff?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. So some of the things that we've been really heads down on, as mentioned, are just this pilot program that Brian will head up after I give this brief on HackFS. And so HackFS was about a month long over the course of July. We had a ton of teams build on Tableland, 30 in total qualified for our prize pool. And in the agenda, you can see some of the teams that we thought had some really interesting projects. We called out 10 in particular, but again, all 30 that contributed and at least tried to use Tableland in some capacity were really interesting. One of which was the Tableland deals protocol. So it was basically like an extension of Tableland that allowed execution of compound operations. And it was just like a really novel and interesting use case of Tableland as a whole. And I think because of that, it was actually the winner of our HackFS like best use, most novel use of Tableland as a whole. And there's some other really cool ones. It was really tough to pick out a winner here, but that Tableland deals protocol was a pretty interesting one. So check out that agenda for some of those links if you're interested in what some of those projects were, and check out our Twitter too as well. We announced those and had a little write-up about them as well. So I think that's a good roundup at HackFS. And just to note that we have some other hackathons coming up, so stay tuned for more details around there, such as ETH Online coming up in about a month from now. So around the pilot program, I'll hand that off to you, Brian.
One thing before we go forward, I really want to focus on the composable data deals one, because I just my brain was firing when I saw that one. There's some really cool things about that are worth calling out. Additionally, one of them is, this is the first case of a person building a protocol on our protocol. And that happened way faster than I expected. So that's just the power of building open protocols. Now people can build these new composable building blocks on top of it. That was one thing to really think about there for people that go look at that link. The other thing that's super cool about that is I've never seen this kind of transaction data pulled off anyplace else ever that I know of. So maybe kind of in some closed Web 2 API, it sort of works like this, but not really. So what this protocol can do is you can swap access control or ownership of data in place. So if you think about if I wanted to trade some data that I have for some data that you have, and what I mean by trade is trade the ability to write to and change that data, or maybe associate with that data, or whatever it is that's interesting about that data. If I want to trade it with you, in most systems that would look like, okay, well, I'll delete my copy, you delete your copy. I'll give you take my data, you write it into whatever you have control of. I'll take your data, write it into whatever I have control of. That's the only way I could think, more or less. But in this one, it does, in a single transaction, it actually swaps your ownership of the data. So the data stays in place, and it's just the ownership of who gets to then change or associate with that data. That's a very crypto native thought, but now applied to data. And I've never seen that before. So really cool to see somebody get creative there with data. Anyway, just had to say that because my neurons were firing there a bit more on that winner. So anyway, cool. Now Brian, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen so many really cool things getting built on the protocol and network. So we had a really big first vote with the rig owners. We had 443 votes come in, and these were for the most exciting projects in our pilot program. And the winners of that were MetaBadge. So that's Raul's project, which is creating a infrastructure to build soulbound tokens. Very easy to use platform, working with the Tableland protocol to make it accessible for different types of traits and features to be embedded in the SBTs. And then Datadon had his Chain Runners extension, also is the second place, which is doing a really cool enabling and disabling of individual traits by storing the metadata in Tableland. So you can actually see a visualization of different avatars changing how they look and what traits and features are live or disabled. And so you can check out those projects. They were released, the information in our Notion and shared in the rigs channel. So those are available for rig owners. And we, just to note, we'll be doing another vote at the end of this pilot program for we'll see how all the different projects evolve over the next few weeks. And so we'll have another vote on the best project coming up. And so stay tuned for that. We also have our partner tracks. So we have Surreal and Dap House building some really cool things as well. And so we're setting up a couple Twitter spaces in the coming weeks with them, and be a cool chance to learn about what's going on there. We've shared as well, I think, in previous conversations what they're building. But yeah, just a lot of really cool innovation happening there, and really exciting to see all the different use cases getting built out between the pilot program and HackFS. So things are really feeling quite lively in the ecosystem. And so just coming up to note, as I mentioned, we have a Twitter Spaces series launching again. This Friday, we've got a really exciting one with the team at Oddfellows. So this is the group that is, really helped to bring the rigs to life. And so all of the art and the mythos of Tableland, we'll get to explore that. So it's going to be a really exciting one. So make sure to check that out. And we'll be doing these pretty much every Friday for the coming weeks. So just we'll be announcing that as we get things dialed in there, but lots coming down the pipeline. And just to note, Dan is doing office hours every Wednesday and Thursday. So it's just such a great opportunity to connect with him around anything you might be curious about, inquiring about into Tableland. He's incredibly knowledgeable and super helpful. We've seen a lot of really great conversations happening there. So that's definitely a resource to check out. And as Dan mentioned, we've got ETH Online happening in September. So this is something that we'll be sponsoring. It'll be another opportunity to learn about Tableland, build with Tableland, and get some resources if you build something notable. And then lastly, we've got a new thing that I'll be trying to initiate here. So I'm one of the more tech noobs on the team, probably the one of the most newbie of the noobs, but I'm a big fan and love following as much as I can. And I've really gotten to actually explore creating tables recently. So this is kind of like if I can do it, anyone can do it type of thing. And so we were thinking that for any rig owners that are just, here because they love the art, love the mission of Tableland, but, are curious to learn more about how to get building with the protocol. This is something that I can basically walk us through how to raise tables. And it's a really easy thing to do, and you can really get an intuitive sense as to what's going on behind the scenes, and really opens your eyes to just how intuitive and interesting this protocol is. So stay tuned for an announcement around that, but we'll be starting those table raises next week, and there'll be just opportunities to join and really get some cool things built on the blockchain. So yeah, I think that's about it for the ecosystem reports. Pass it back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, nice. Super exciting on all fronts. Table raisings, I went through the first one with Brian, and it's I think it's gonna be really fun for people. And it actually links so many pieces. So Carson was talking about the fact that tables themselves are NFTs. So there's a really cool link up there where you get to see these things after you're done creating them and understand what we mean with mutable data and even a bit of SQL. So sweet. Thank you both. Let's see if I can get Sander back up. It's time to dig into rigs. I thought we would, cool, there he is. I thought we would talk about kind of two things looking back, I really wanted to just talk about the Mint weekend and kind of things that we learned there about what went well and what didn't, and then we can jump into the roadmap and what's coming in the future, and then we can kick it over to Q&A.
Nice.
Sandra, do you want to
Sounds
walk
great.
us through the weekend and like, yeah, what went well, what didn't go well, what do we learn that we should share with other projects, I guess?
Yeah. Well, yeah, first of all, what's up, everyone? Nice to be back. I was out for a couple weeks doing like a joint time away / ETH Paris. So nice to be back at the terminal, sleeping in my own bed. But yeah, so the Mint. So what went well, what didn't go well? I think the biggest pain that we had was actually with our allow list, right? So we had this issue where we flipped on the Mint and everyone just started freaking out because they were supposed to be able to mint, but they couldn't mint because we had this silly little lowercasing issue. In hindsight, we maybe shouldn't. Basically, the thing we did was built our own allow list handling on Tableland.
Well, actually, so it was actually really cool what we did. We just made a mistake on making the address comparison that we just had to patch a fix real quick. But yeah, talk people through why that allow list was actually super cool. If we'd caught that single bug, it would have been amazingly cool, but it was still super cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so typically there's a couple different ways to do allow lists, and we as a team haven't done tons of NFT drops, so we kind of bootstrapped ourselves in these little kind of quirky things that you have to figure out. So the style that we went with is this Merkle tree style, where basically you need to submit a Merkle proof, and I don't know. I'm not going to dive into what Merkle trees are and what the proof is and everything like that. But just suffice to say that given a set of Ethereum addresses and allow list spots, you generate this tree. Think of it as just like an entry in a list, basically. So the contract needs to know that you have an allowance on that list, and it needs to know exactly what that list is without storing the whole thing in the contract, because that would be expensive. So there's a really clever way to do that with Merkle trees. And typically when people do that, they set up a backend server to serve to them the Merkle tree root, or just the entire, all the data that makes up that tree, because you need to be able to pull out the individual entries in order to create the proof and all that stuff. But with Tableland, you can just swap out that backend. So what we did is we generated a couple different tables, or one giant table, actually, that has a few different columns for like the different phases of the mint, what your allowances are for each different phase, and how many free mints you have and how many paid mints you have. There's a couple folks we worked with, like Oddfellows, for example. They got a couple free mints, so we need to handle that as well. So the easiest way to do that, I mean, it was just really intuitive. It was like a no-brainer, It's like, well, we have Tableland, like, let's just use that. So basically, it means that you can do that allow list handling without any backend, which is pretty cool.
What I think is notable there is like a lot of projects have their front end for minting, and you have to go through that front end because that front end is where the API calls are made. But technically, with our Mint, people could have done it through, say, Etherscan if they had known in advance how to query that table that was on Tableland. So there was no backend. Of course, we didn't create the docs for doing that. It would have been a lot to explain to people. But in the future, you could imagine that, because then you have like composable mints. Like people could create different mint interfaces and things like that, which when you start broadening up what an NFT really is, like you think that, okay, that actually is really interesting when we move beyond artwork and things like that, where maybe there's millions of mints, So yeah, very cool. So a little bug there. What about the timeline of the different phases? I feel like we made an epic, great, cool first move, and then maybe stumbled on the second move with some ideas of how other projects could do that?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I'm sure everyone has opinions about this, but we definitely got some pushback around just kind of having an over allocated wait list. And essentially, I just copied that from what Premint recommends and what Premint did with their collector pass. And theirs was way more over allocated than ours. You know, they had like 50,000 signups or something. But what that leads to is obviously a gas war. I think when we flipped on the whitelist sale, and I mean, we all kind of thought for a few seconds that something was broken on the web page. I mean, it kind of was because the Tableland side became a little slow because there were so many people reading from that allow list table. But yeah, basically it sold out in like a couple of minutes or something, which is a bummer for.
But so actually, interesting side effect of the slow query to Tableland was, even though people were clobbering to get in, I don't think we ever generated a true gas war because everybody was too bogged down. So pretty like maybe there's actually a technical approach there to do something like that. I'm not sure. But you skipped over the oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, our validator does do rate limiting, so per IP address, so it may have been doing some of that. But who's to say if someone could have figured out how to make the proofs and then they were just using a bot. So, but I don't know if that happened or not.
Yeah.
I doubt that was the bulk of the traffic. But yeah, hard to know.
Yeah, I feel like that either we needed to have a different allow list at that point that was much smaller, like different phases of allow list, or just go to auction. But you skipped over the cool thing, which was the extended allow list period, which I thought was in hindsight one of the best features of what we did, and I think other projects should totally adopt that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of copied from Moonbirds because they had like a huge window where you could go and mint, and it felt just chill, you know. I've been in a situation where you have a 12-hour window and it's kind of panicky. It's like trying to line up the time zone and everything like that. So yeah, I think we did like, was it 2 days, 3 days? No, it was 4 days.
Yeah, we did it over the weekend, Thursday night or Thursday midday to Monday midnight. 3.5 days, I guess. Yeah, I think the cool thing there was that we genuinely wanted everybody on the allow list to mint. So anybody who didn't mint, it was purely just they didn't check their spam box or something like that. But like everybody had time, hopefully, to dig up their wallet and get into that mint. I do think we had some bots in the allow list, it seemed. So there's some improvements that should be made there. That was a little out of our hands, but yeah, I think some ideas there would be maybe to have much more rigorous Discord or Twitter filters, things like that. But all in all, I think it was okay.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we did use because we use Premint for the allow lists, and they have this bot removal thing, but I don't know. It's a black box. I'm not sure what they actually do there. And it's a notoriously hard thing to solve for. It's so easy to create Twitter accounts and then tie that to different addresses, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's from the past mint. Maybe I think what a lot of people are really excited about is now we've mentioned both on the Rigs webpage and our blog post. You and I have had different interviews where we've kind of gone over the features that we're going to land, and we've more or less leaked as much detail about those features as we want so far. Though I have written up some blurbs about these features that we'll put into our docs to help give a good like one-stop resource to just give you the sort of thesaurus of features coming to Rigs. But the next thing is the roadmap. Like, when can people expect these things to land on their rigs? And we're ready to share some more details there. So let's jump into that.
Yeah. Well, actually, I realized after we came up with these points that there's one that we missed, which is just open sourcing rigs. And I'd like to do that by the next town hall, so within the next couple of weeks. But basically, if Aaron was here, he's not, but maybe next town hall we can put him up on stage to talk about all the rendering and everything. We have this really cool CLI basically to generate rigs, and it can spit out all the different stats about the different runs you can do. You can generate like 20,000 rigs or 500 rigs, and it basically pulls data from Tableland and uses all the different parts tables and the layers and everything like that. And I think it is actually a really valuable set of tooling that we thought about, like, oh, maybe we could make this generic tool for making an NFT, and perhaps that's something that we could explore later. But we're just going to open source rigs by itself with all its kind of like details about that specific project. So you can set like, what traits you want to be more rare and all that kind of stuff. And the way it works with SQL is awesome because it lets you design your tables using a local SQLite table or multiple tables. And then you basically flip over to Tableland, and it will persist that to Tableland, and it will sync all your layers and everything to IPFS. And when you actually do the rendering, it will push the images to IPFS as well. Like, you can set your pinning API and everything. So it's super full featured, and Aaron went just nuts on it and added a full featured CLI to it and everything. So it's pretty fun. That'll be fun to share. But yeah.
Can I say the next one? Oh, can I say something about the next one before I go into it? Which is basically, I just wanted to point out that we mentioned the garage and this thing that's inspired a lot by the proof Moonbird's nesting. And I just want to say everybody's been thinking about it backwards, which is kind of cool. And technically today everybody's in the garage. So there's a bit of a flip here that we're going to talk about. But everybody's been thinking about it backwards. That's all I wanted to mention. And that we're going to give you the tool to take your rig out of the garage, which is, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, being in the garage is not as fun as flying around. So it's and then we can do other cool things. Like the rigs, the whole lore of the rigs is that they're out there building, kind of rebuilding like the decentralized the web that was kind of re-centralized when the singularity happened and all that stuff. So yeah, they have to be doing stuff in the world. So yeah, but the garage is where you can do some other things we'll get into later. So it does still play a role. Like sometimes you might want to go back to the garage. So let's see. Yeah, in mid-September, we're basically going to open the door to the garage. So let you take your rig out and start flying around. And part of that concept is a pilot. And we're going to start with a default pilot. And you'll be able to measure like how much time, how many blocks have gone by that you've been in flight. And then later, we'll get to this later, we're going to release the ability to customize your pilot. So this is something that I've talked about before, I think with Kevin and maybe on the Nooch podcast, this concept of piloting. But before that, the next thing we're going to dive into, so like mid-October, about a month after we open the doors, is the first just sort of fun, like non-token based rewards. So the idea there is that you'll be able to get a badge that will indicate that you're flying around, and then we'll do some fun, like kind of swag sort of thing. So nothing crazy, but just something fun. And then soon after that, we're going to get in deeper into some of the more fun stuff that actually tied to our network, so our testnet network. So the ability to actually stake your rig and participate in securing the network. So we'll share more about that, but you'll need to be out of the garage to do that. And I know, like, we got a bunch of Moonbirds in, and what they did when they did the garaging was they made it so that, you know, if your Moonbird is listed, then they'll unnest it and that kind of thing. So we'll be taking some feedback from them on why they did that, and not just like prevent transfers and everything, but there's a bunch of little things to figure out there. And then, yeah, mid-November, we're going to do the first badging. So this is where any in-flight rig will be eligible for badges. We're going to do a mix of automated and community-driven badges. So we'll have a voting system to earn badges. This is sort of like the subjective ones. And then the automated ones will be able to, if the badge is driven by like on-chain state or Tableland data, we can automatically issue the badges. And yeah, the cool thing about badges is they transfer with the rig. So you can build up a rig with badges and be able to kind of like add value to it in that way. That concept gets really cool with the pilots, I think, because you can do this thing where you can set a custom pilot. We're starting with the default one just because it doesn't make sense to be piloting a rig without a pilot, and we want to do a lot of this other stuff before we can get to the custom rig pilots. But the custom rig pilots, I think, is where some of this stuff really shines, like the fingerprinting idea. So basically, if you have an NFT that you love, you can pilot with that one. And then if you sell your rig, that pilot is like locked to the rig in the rig's history. Someone else can set a new pilot, but it's just kind of always in there and available to be used. Like if you go back to the garage and switch pilots, you could use a squiggle from somebody that was a previous rig owner. So you kind of build up this history, and I'm super pumped to explore some of the interesting concepts there. And let's see. Yeah, that was kind of a ramble, but got anything to add, Andrew?
No, I think that's it. I mean, that's the 2022 roadmap. So I don't know. I'm pretty excited about all of it. The flight time rewards, I'm pretty fun. I think that's gonna be pretty fun getting creative there. And we have the first couple planned out, and then we'll do more exciting things. And then yeah, I think just getting people out of the garage is gonna be pretty cool. So yeah, I think with that, I mean, we're pushing an hour here, so why don't we open it up for some Q&A? If you don't want to ask your question, jump into general. If you do want to ask your question, go ahead and raise your hand. And I see two already, so let me grab the first one. Apathy, if you could pop up on stage. Okay, so no response from Apathy. Apathy, go ahead and... Oh, there we go.
Oh, there he is.
No audio, though.
Let's try Neanderthal.
Yeah. All right. Apathy, just raise your hand again if you want to try again.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. Nice to hear you for the first time, I think. Lots on Discord there.
Yeah, I know. I'm always in here going ballistic on some of the rigs, and I'm always tagging you guys to open channel, so I really appreciate it. My question is on a fairly non-technical side, and I think it's been asked a few times, and I understand if you can't necessarily answer it for whatever reason. I've always seen like the question being posed, which is like, what? So let's say I had a rig on, like, I can understand the prospect of owning a rig, but like multi-owning rigs for me still doesn't like add up. Is there by any chance that maybe you could touch up on that? And I just honestly, I like the art. I'm just trying to collect one of each just because I like it. But outside of that, I kind of have an understanding. Like these are, could potentially be keys to running the validators. At which point it'd make more sense to own multiple keys, I guess. But maybe if you could please help me out. I'm trying to wrap my round around Tableland. I know it's a protocol first, and that's kind of new for me. And I think for a lot of NFT collectors as well, normally it's like the NFT, then the product. And this is kind of like flipped on its head. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around it so I can explain it to people as well. Because they're always asking me the same question when I talk about Tableland. They're like, yeah, but it's a protocol. Like, why would I care about the NFT? Like, anyone can use it. And I
Yeah.
feel there's an advantage to having the NFT because it is a protocol and you're part of the first. But that's outside of that. I don't know how to reply, and I'd like to have a. I don't know. Maybe there is no answer, but if you could please help me, I'd really appreciate it, just so I can conceptualize um, that particular aspect of NFT collecting to the broader communities that don't necessarily have something like this. I think this is so new that it's just hard to like even describe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like from a collector's view, you can think of it as trying to add some real, like tying the real world to an NFT's utility in a way. So in order to run the Tableland network requires real work in the real world, like spending dollars to run infrastructure and everything. And tying some of the value of the resulting network to an NFT, I think is super interesting, or we all do. So that's kind of like, I guess, the way to summarize it for like towards a collector, I mean, because a lot of NFT projects, they have, in their description, in their hype, it's like, what's the utility? And of course, we're going to do some fun swag and stuff too, but like the end goal is to make that utility like something actually tangible, tied to real work. And it's definitely an experiment. Like, I'm not gonna say, I mean, it really hasn't been done, so obviously it's an experiment. But yeah, that's kind of how I would summarize it. Does that help at all?
It's different, right? I think that's only right. I think I understand it, but I just think it's so different from the norm, right? Like if we use
Yeah.
Moonbird versus this, like we can conceptualize. I can understand the nesting, and I get that part. So right there, I'm good. But then, like if you told, like if I explain that to anyone, it'd be like it's a Moonbird derivative, but it's not because it's a protocol first. So,
Right.
yeah.
I mean,
It's so different.
the thing is an NFT obviously is just a token, so we could do this kind of thing without the art attached to it. So maybe that's another kind of way to think about it. Most networks use, like a fungible token, and I'm not saying that we're necessarily not going to do that or something, but you can think about utility networks. Most of them are using fungible tokens, and there's no reason you can't integrate 721 into that in some way. And then just attaching art to it is a way, in the theory, the hypothesis, it's a more effective way to capture and build a community, because NFTs have proven to do that really well. Some would say more so than like an ERC20. So yeah, it's just kind of an exploration of the token aspect of an NFT, versus like it's just a piece of art or a membership to a club that gets access to other mints and that kind of thing. I think like with Moonbirds or any of the other ones like that, it's really easy to understand the utility. It's like, well, I'm just going to get access to more mints, in the future. And that's super easy to wrap your head around. So I hear you. It's different.
I wanted to actually add a little bit there about just to frame it up with our own thinking, because as we're building Tableland, the protocol, one of the big motivators of building that protocol at all is to say NFTs can be a lot more than what we all think of as NFTs today. So an NFT is, if you just boil it down, is just digital ownership. And so what are all the different things you can do with that, and what does that mean for the owner? And rigs are definitely our place to explore that. So like Sandra said, a lot of this is actually still in the research phase for us, because there aren't very good models that have come before us about what that means. But like, we do want you to be able to contribute your collection of NFTs to building a better network with us, and we want to find ways to reward you for doing that. What exactly that means, we have some really good ideas, and we're starting to try to put that together. Some of them are going to work really well, and some of them won't. So that might have a little bit to do with the ambiguity, like just a word I find myself using a lot today, not to give the community whiplash. We're just telling you concretes as we see them, but we really think NFTs can be so much more. And like, if a Tableland type of project wants to launch an NFT today, it has to lead with amazing art. That's what people understand. And then we can draw you into all the other ideas we have about what it can be beyond that. So we're trying to do that for sure.
Yeah, and just to be clear, like we are working very hard and are very motivated to drive value to the NFT, versus like in the form of the utility that we've been discussing so far. Like that's part of our motivation, absolutely.
And then I wanted to ask a question that was asked by one community member in particular. So not my question, but he seems really adamant on asking this particular question. That was like ownership of the protocol versus. So I understand ownership of the NFT, but the protocol. So we're kind of like, as owners of the NFT, we're to my understanding, based on what we've mentioned now, we're pretty much kind of writing with the protocol. Would you say, like, we're in tandem with the protocol, like we're part of like the access to, and that's how I see it, at least. Like, seeing some of the projects that you all posted, that's, I mean, like, for some people maybe they want like alpha groups and things like that. To be honest, that I don't know how else other people can put it, but that's how I see Tableland. Like, the more projects that are presented to the community, I get access to that early, right? Like, I get to see what these projects are trying to do. So then that, to me, is the information that I find it value as a Tableland holder on a personal note. But
that's
if you can touch up on that.
Yeah, the point you just got at is something that I've been thinking quite a bit. That actually is pretty subtle. Like Sandra and I were actually just talking about this yesterday, about opening, like where our opinion should be around opening more channels around the marketplace for alpha or for rig floor prices, things like that. And part of it's pretty benign, so we could just open those so people have streams of OpenSea data to check in on and things like that. But you're hitting the nail on the head as far as my belief goes around alpha, which is Tableland is trying to pave the way, like I said before, pave the way for these radically new ways to compose and build NFTs. So when we're thinking about the protocol, we think the protocol can become the basis for thousands of new NFTs over the coming years, right? And so one main piece of the alpha we want to give you is the front end, the front row seat to what those projects are and what they're trying to do differently, and what their go to market is looking like, who their target audience is, how you can help them. Can you invest in them? Can you be in their line for when they drop tokens or when they drop their NFT? We want to get you access to all that kind of alpha as we build out this brand new ecosystem that's thinking about this in more advanced ways. And I think Pilot Program was a really great showcase of that. Just, those teams have been working a lot of them came in with ideas they've been working on for quite a while, but they came in and it's a pretty lightweight program as far as what we ask from them. But then we try to contribute back as much technical help and feedback as possible, but really just let them explore. And then there's a two-way sort of value exchange that happens. One, we want to put them in front of you all so you can see what's coming, like what's going to happen in this ecosystem over the next couple months, what's exciting for dApps and new protocols. Are these projects going to turn into opportunities that you want to be part of as well? And then inversely, they can get an audience of a few thousand sort of like thinkers that are on the forefront of Web3 that are the rig owners, and get your feedback on like, what do you want from this ecosystem? What do you need? And I think that as we continue to grow that program and show you what would be possible with that kind of feedback loop, I really think that's the major alpha that you're going to start seeing. It might take a little time, but I've been seeing some awesome success already. But then as far as like the lockstep of the NFT and the protocol itself, I mean, the protocol right now exists as it's a non-economic model, right? We have a test net. We're just landing our validators. And we have some visions for how we get you all rig owners involved in the growth and security of that network over the next few months. And we hope that can grow into something really innovative and new. But that's actually one of the big pieces of research. Like, that's never been done before. So you'll have to just we'll just communicate it as much as we can as we get closer to it. But one big piece of that is already in our roadmap, which is the validator staking and what we're trying to do there. So keep your eye on it for sure.
Yeah, there's this concept of the flywheel, which people always talk about in Web3. But these projects built on Tableland, if you are part of or in some way invested in the protocol, and I'm being purposely vague there, just given Andrew's context before, then it's beneficial to you if those projects do well, so then you have this flywheel effect that really is what, in my view, makes the concept of ownership like super meaningful in Web3.
Yeah, I will add. Because I'm not. Thank you so much. Because I'm not in the technical side of I guess ownership. Like, I think it has given me as a holder the opportunity to view these new protocols not these new protocols, but what these projects are intending to do. Like, I'll take one of the members, Data Dane, who's I think in the currently in the audience. They won one of the latest votes, and being able to just talk, and like, I found out they were a CCO as a project, and just these type of communications I don't think are the norm within NFT projects when they're trying to make new changes. And having the front row to it, I do think, is in large part the reason why I've elected to just be more involved. This is speaking for myself, so I did want to commend you all. It's for me, it's fascinating because although I'm not a tech guy, like I barely can understand what's happening. I can't conceptualize like what a project is attempting to do, and then I can also hope that in their success, it equally will trickle down or grow the protocol as a whole.
You just gave me a really interesting idea, and we can take this into the Rigs owner chat after the town hall if it's something that people are interested in. But my comment about the alpha channel and external projects, well, I don't think that that's super exciting. What you're saying is again, I think it's really insightful. And one thing that maybe we could do is with mixing non-technical people that have a real genuine interest in what are the new projects in NFTs that are coming online, mixing them with the technical people that are in the community already that share a lot of those interests. I wonder if we could do more deep dives of external NFT projects to say, like, what's more interesting, or like what's interesting about a project that maybe is totally outside of Tableland. Like what is interesting from a technical or innovation point of view that they're trying to do, that can actually help people figure out if they want to be part of those projects too. So let's chat about that, because I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah, there's something cool there. Another thing cool there, which is just like you get, potentially we could set it up so builders get kind of like an audience of testers or guinea pigs to bounce concepts off of, that are non-technical, like an elevator pitch sort of thing. Sounds pretty interesting.
I have seen that. I'm fairly new to ETH, but on Solana, I'm kind of a little bit more on the Sol side, and there is an attempt to have something like that normally on Twitter Spaces, but I see that with just average projects. It's not necessarily like protocols, or especially when they have builder kind of Twitter Spaces. It's not. They do have pitches. It's just very limited to the scope of things. So I think there might be something there for any NFT project as a whole.
Yeah, I was actually also thinking, like, we just pick one. So you could imagine ASM Brains, we could decide to come together on a Friday afternoon and spend an hour trying to figure out what they're actually doing and what the innovation is in there, and answer questions. And somebody would have to do a bit of pre-research on that, or like somebody technical that already knows it can come and just chat about it. And I think what you two are saying is like getting the teams themselves to come and do technical pitches, which is a bit of what Pilot Program does, but we could broaden it to non-Tableland too for in between periods.
Or just getting rig owners like join those pitches, would be cool.
Oh, speaking of that, and then this would be my last, I guess, second suggestion, and that was just I think the reason I have mentioned like Twitter Spaces before, it's just to have the outside communities, the communities that aren't in Tableland or own rigs, have opportunity to hop in. Sometimes I think the lack of understanding is what leads people to not particularly get involved. But in the event that we can showcase, especially some of the projects that have already applied, like having an outward-facing type of, as I mentioned, Twitter space, I guess would be it, where there's just, it gives us a new type of engagement for non-holders. Because I think as a holder, I'm excited and I can conceptualize things. So maybe there's questions that other holders can either ask the project that we wouldn't particularly have any understanding of. So maybe the projects that have applied, maybe even their own holders don't know that they're in the process of joining Tableland. Like I can say Memepo, which is one of the partners that we have, falls under one of the umbrellas of the projects that we're currently partnered with. I remember I joined their Discord and I would mention Tableland to them, and they had no clue. Like they were like, "What are you talking about? What is a Tableland?" And it was interesting to me because here I am as a new user to the ecosystem, and through Tableland I was able to see what was happening. But it was far more interesting to recognize that their own community may not be aware of this, and that was kind of bummed me out more, because those are the people I want to know more, right? Like those are the people I want to be excited for their own project. So quite possibly something of that nature in the future.
A couple thoughts there. We are actually we've been doing spaces. We were doing spaces quite a bit before rigs kind of took all our attention, but we're booting them back up, and we have a ton of spaces starting to get scheduled. And we'll do one with all of the developer track teams. That's getting scheduled now. And then we'll do one with Surreal. We're trying to schedule that now. They're the ones that have actually been working on the Mempo project. And then We'll also do a Twitter Spaces with Dap House, which is another one of the partner track in the pilot program, and they'll talk about some of their game development in Decentraland. But then we have other projects. So the Twitter Spaces is a great venue for external projects that maybe have nothing to do with Tableland, which is what we've done in the past. And you can find all the old ones. They're on our YouTube channel recorded as well. Oh, and we have the Oddfellows one on Friday, which should be really cool. So, and I saw, just to give a little bit of space before we drop off, I did see a question in general from Apathy, just asking about the plots behind the lore and what's the next big thing. Well, I think all the plots behind the lore are on our website. You can find it at the Tableland.xyz/rigs. There's also a blog post on our blog that kind of splices the lore with some of the technical plans, and so those two are good reads. And then the next big thing is actually in the notes for today's call, which is the next big thing is opening the garage doors, and that's coming as soon as we can land it, and we'll get that roadmap added to our documentation site so that we can keep it up to date and keep adding new stuff further out than the new year. And yeah, I think that's probably a good spot to call it. It's been a long one, but like I said, we had a ton of stuff to update you all on, and yeah, it's been good. I hope you all enjoyed it. We can keep answering questions over on general, or if you're a rig owner, happy to jump into the rigs chat. And yeah, I hope everybody has a great Tuesday. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.